Good morning and welcome to the Daily Cyber Briefing for Wednesday the 29th of January. I'm Stephen Ridgway. Zyxel CPE devices are facing active exploitation due to an unpatched vulnerability, or currently unpatched vulnerability. The vulnerability is tracked as CVE-2024-40891, and it is very similar to the previously discussed CVE-2024-40890. The main difference being that 91 is telnet-based, whereas 90 is an HTTP-based attack. Both vulnerabilities allow an unauthenticated attacker to execute arbitrary commands using service accounts. Right now, given the position in the network of these devices, that does allow for an attacker, fairly comprehensive access to all sorts of things that are going on. There is no current patch available from Zyxel, but watch out for that because hopefully it will be coming soon. From an architecture perspective, this vulnerability only matters if you have not put in place a good architecture around protecting management interfaces of devices. And as I said before, it should be a piece of basic secure design. Don't manage your key devices over the interfaces that are used for business, line of business applications, or if that's unavoidable, which unfortunately for lots of this stuff that is the case, then at the very least put in place some access controls around not just who can log in through the management interface, but who can connect to the management interface. Generally, that is possible to do one way or another. If it isn't possible to do, have a think about whether you have selected kit which is appropriately addressing your risk profile. Tie down access to these interfaces to only known IP addresses, for example, or known devices, one way or another. Lots of ways you can go about doing that. But think about that as part of secure design. If your management interface to a piece of network kit is accessible over the internet, don't be surprised if people attack it. And also bear in mind that at any particular point there may be no vulnerabilities known in that device on that interface. That is not a good indicator that there won't be issues in the future. So think about that as you are designing stuff. I've said all this before. If you listen into this podcast regularly, you'll be well aware that we've spoken about some of this stuff already. Now, what's interesting about this particular thing is that it does appear that compromised devices may be accessing, there may be a connection with some vulnerability or misuse of Simple Help remote desktop software. So just be aware, there's some discussions going on at the moment around Simple Help. There is there are some vulnerabilities that came out last year, a little string of them, that would potentially allow attackers to escalate privileges to administrative users and upload arbitrary files to devices that are running simple help. So there is some indication that there is a connection between compromise of the Zyxel devices and exploit of simple help remote desktop software in order presumably to give further access in once you've compromised the edge device. Be aware of this. So there are patches for the simple help remote desktop software. The particular CVEs we're talking about is CVEs 2024-577, 26, 27 and 28. They have been patched, so it is strongly recommended to apply the patches or upgrade to fixed versions of Simple Help, which you should do anyway, regardless of the fact that there may be some combination between these two particular attacks. Well, on other matters, right, this one goes into the category of come on guys, you can do better than this. I love the I don't know what the subtitle. They've got a special name, haven't they? Like not the the strap line or whatever it is. But in this particular article from the Register, it's think government cybersecurity is bad. Guess again, it's alarmingly so. So in 1990, goodness, that's dating me, 2022, the UK government committed to hardening government systems against cyber attacks, in particular actions to be taken against cyber attacks by 2025. A new report from the Spending Watchdog, the national, which is like the National Audit Office, NAO, said that even hitting those targets by 2030 would be ambitious, as in not a hope, kind of along the lines of all the other things that the government over the last 10 years has promised that had no hope of being deliverable, which is fine because clearly he's not going to be in government by then anyway, so make it somebody else's problem. Overpromised, underachieved, yet again. The government cybersecurity strategy of 2022 is not a wonderful document. It comes from government, so it's obviously not going to be a wonderful document, but there is some good stuff in it. However, it just looks like nobody's put much effort into doing anything about that. There are they've gone as far as setting up things like the Government Security Group's GovAssure scheme. I'm sure all the money and effort's been put into creating jobs in the scheme and not actually securing anything. And there has been a bit of a focus on ministerial departments and certain non-ministerial departments, but it really isn't wide-reaching enough. Of the 72 IT systems deemed critical to running the government's most important services, 58 were independently reviewed, and significant gaps have been found in pretty much all of them. So basically, why does this matter? Well, firstly, if you have any influence over this area, I think it's difficult to argue for not doing something about it. We live in a world which is, I think, significantly more dangerous than it was in 10 years ago. So we should really be, probably 2022 is a bit late for realizing that actually something needed to be done. What else? as for the rest of us, I think we just need to be aware of the fact that very little is genuinely being done to address security weaknesses in these systems, and I think it's kind of the emphasis has got to be on us at the moment to make sure that we're keeping on top of securing our own stuff, because I don't think we can rely on the state to provide much in the way of help. It can't even protect itself. Interesting article anyway in the Register. If you are concerned about these sorts of things, have a little read. I think one of the things that surprised me reading this is what percentage of government systems would be considered legacy systems, which are almost invariably vulnerable to some form of attack or another. So it also talks about the fact that there is a huge skills gap in the government, which, to be totally honest, I'm not surprised about. My personal experience of trying to do anything to do with cybersecurity or information security in the public sector is that it remains an almost entirely closed shop. In order to do the things that need to be done, you would need to have a great deal of influence. So you can get functional kind of jobs there, but the roles which should be showing leadership in there are rarely being given to people who are particularly good in that sense. Partly because the best people are just not applying. It pays, the pay's crap, and it's clearly not given much priority within government. And secondly, it is very much still who you know rather than what you know. I'm sure there will be people listening to this that would thoroughly disagree with that, but that's just what I've seen personally. The talent just isn't being applied in the right places there. And then finally on that, the method of procurement of services, so not just recruiting people, which appears to be not focused on getting people who can actually address the issues, but the way in which public sector acquires services is so out of touch with the reality of how businesses that provide services work, that contracts, and this is like first-hand knowledge. I've seen this various times. The contracts are just awful. The method of tendering is designed to put off anybody other than specialists in managing the tendering process. It kind of means that from a business perspective, it guarantees that from a public sector perspective, the quality of service will be poor and the cost will be significantly higher than if you'd actually gone to market. And portals such as, I forget the name of the thing, but there was this worry that everything was being swept up by the big players that had influence at senior levels. So it's like, oh, okay, we'll create a portal where smaller organisations can tender for particular sorts of security contracts. Good luck trying to navigate your way through that sort of thing. And even if you do, there are so many stupid rules partly around disclosing commercially sensitive information, and then also around not being able to manage your contract in a commercially sensible way, as in the opportunities for commercial negotiation if the customer, as it were, moves the goalposts, are very limited. It's just a mess, total mess. So not at all surprising, rather worrying. yeah, if this is something that you're concerned about, as I am generally, it is certainly worth a read. It is a little depressing, however. And then finally from me on the, and it remains a little bit depressing, there's an article in Dark Reading that I came across this morning that talks about the risks of being involved in vulnerability research and declaring vulnerabilities that are found. It seems increasingly nation states and specific larger organizations are targeting researchers with lawsuits in order to prevent the disclosure of vulnerabilities, which is seen as a cheaper and easier way than dealing with the vulnerabilities. So on the face of it, you'd look at that and go, well, actually, that's appalling. You know, surely everybody should have the right to declare anything that they find to anybody. But sort of, I'll stop and think about this. If the researchers have not been engaged by whatever the organization is that they're testing, and they're just randomly testing stuff, that is difficult to differentiate from people attacking stuff. So, I think sometimes in the industry we forget that there is no difference between an unauthorized researcher and an attacker. What happens next is absolutely not black and white. And I've seen, over the years, the number of genuinely helpful disclosures that I've been involved with is minuscule compared to the number of attempts at extortion. Yes, compared to the number of attempts at extortion. I found a vulnerability in your systems. You can be taken over by whatever. I'm a researcher from blah, 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 somewhere or other outside of the jurisdiction of the UK. I'd be very happy to share all this with you if you'll just give me a bit of money. It's like, well, get lost. So I can kind of actually see that there is some justification for legal action against groups which are doing this stuff without permission, which is probably not going to sit well with a lot of people who may or may not be listening to this particular briefing. But I actually, on reflection, after some thought, I can see why we've ended up in this situation. I mean, if you are in the business of doing vulnerability research, just make sure that you're doing it with a solid legal foundation. If you stumble across something, I don't know, I think depending on local legislation, it actually, for you, it may be better to not try to exploit this stuff commercially, maybe not even disclose it at all. I can see where we're going, why that might be the approach. But I'd be interested to know what other people think about this particular issue. But if you want to be doing that kind of work, I think it's fair to say, make sure that you're doing it with the agreement of the people whose stuff you are testing. And if you are doing it, if you stumble across it, as it were, make sure that you follow any responsible disclosure processes which that particular organisation may have in place. if you've played by the rules, it would be very difficult to argue that you're doing stuff illegally. If you don't play by the rules, then how are they supposed to know that you're not just another attacker pretending to be a researcher? So it's very difficult to do. Anyway, that's enough from me for today. I hope you have a good Wednesday, and I'll speak to you